As they prepared for sleep in the inn at Bree, darkness lay on Buckland. A mist strayed in the dells and along the river bank. The house at Crickhollow stood silent. Fatty Bolger opened the door cautiously and peered out. A feeling of fear had been growing on him all day, and he was unable to rest or go to bed. There was a brooding threat in the breathless night air. As he stared out into the gloom, a black shadow moved under the trees. The gate seemed to open of its own accord and close again without a sound. Terror seized him. He shrank back, and for a moment he stood trembling in the hall. Then he shut and locked the door. The night deepened. There came the soft sound of horses led with stealth along the lane. Outside the gate they stopped, and 3 black figures entered, like shades of night creeping across the ground. One went to the door, one to the corner of the house on either side, and there they stood, as still as the shadows of stones while the night went slowly on. The house and the quiet trees seemed to be waiting breathlessly. There was a faint stir in the leaves, and a cock crowed far away. The cold hour before dawn was passing. The figure by the door moved. In the dark, without a moon or stars, a drawn blade gleamed, as if a chill light had been unsheathed. There was a blow, soft but heavy, and the door shuddered.
"Open, in the name of Mordor,"
said a voice, thin and menacing. At a second blow, the door yielded and fell back. With timbers burst and lock broken, the black figures passed swiftly in. At that moment, among the trees nearby, a horn rang out. It rent the night like fire on a hilltop.
Awake! Fear! Fire! Foes! Awake!
Fatty Bolger had not been idle. As soon as he saw the dark shapes creep from the garden, he knew that he must run for it or perish. And run he did. Out of the back door, through the garden and over the fields. When he reached the nearest house more than a mile away, he collapsed on the doorstep.
No! 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 No!
He was crying.
No, not me! I haven't got it!
It was some time before anyone could make out what he was babbling about. At last they got the idea that enemies were in Buckland, some strange invasion from the old forest. And then they lost no more time.
Fear! Fire! Foes!
The brandybucks were blowing the horn call of Buckland that had not been sounded for 100 years, not since the White Wolves came in fell winter, when the brandywine was frozen over.
Awake! Awake!
Far away, answering horns were heard. The alarm was spreading. The black figures fled from the house. One of them let fall a hobbit cloak on the step as he ran. In the lane, the noise of hoofs broke out, and gathering to a gallop, went hammering away into the darkness. All about Crickhollow there was the sound of horns blowing, and voices crying and feet running. But the black riders rode like a gale to the north gate. Let the little people blow. Sauron would deal with them later. Meanwhile, they had another errand. They knew now that the house was empty and the ring had gone. They rode down the guards at the gate and vanished from the Shire.
Welcome to Tools of Evil. In today's episode, we will discuss the Lord of the Rings Morgul Blade, a knife in the dark that leaves an insidious wound that will be sure to keep you there. You see, the knife was used by the Lord of the Nazgul, the Witch King of Angmar. The Witch King of Angmar is one of the most formidable villains in J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings trilogy. He is the leader of the 9 ring wraiths, also known as the Nazgul, who were once powerful kings and sorcerers corrupted by Sauron after receiving rings of power. The Morgul knife was a short blade carried by the Witch King of Angmar during the Third Age. The Morgul blade is described as having been forged with dark magic in the fortress of Minas Morgul, which was once the city of Minas Ithil, before it fell to the forces of Sauron and became corrupted. The blade itself is a symbol of the dark power of Sauron and the evil of the Nazgul. It was used by the Nazgul to poison enemies. As explained by Elrond, the purpose of the knife was to break off in the wound, leaving a shard in the victim's body. The remaining blade would soon turn to dust, and the shard works its way through the body to the heart. When a person is wounded by a Morgul blade, the wound does not heal like a normal injury. Instead, the victim begins to succumb to the effects of the blade's poison, which spreads through their body, weakening them and eventually turning them into a wraith if the shard reaches their heart. This transformation process is known as passing into shadow, and it is depicted as a slow and agonizing descent into darkness. One of the most notable instances involving a Morgul blade occurs in The Fellowship of the Ring, when Frodo Baggins is stabbed by the Witch King of Angmar.
Over the lip of the little dell, on the side away from the hill, they felt, rather than saw, a shadow rise. One shadow or more than one. They strained their eyes, and the shadows seemed to grow. Soon there could be no doubt. 3 or 4 tall black figures were standing there on the slope, looking down on them. So black were they that they seemed like black holes in the deep shade behind them. Frodo thought that he heard the faint hiss as of venomous breath, and felt a thin, piercing chill. Then the shapes slowly advanced. Terror overcame Pippin and Merry, and they threw themselves flat on the ground. Sam shrank to Frodo's side. Frodo was hardly less terrified than his companions. He was quaking as if he was bitter cold, but his terror was swallowed up in a sudden temptation to put on the ring. The desire to do this laid hold of him, and he could think of nothing else. He did not forget the barrow, nor the message of Gandalf, but something seemed to be compelling him to disregard all warnings, and he longed to yield. Not with the hope of escape or of doing anything, either good or bad. He simply felt that he must take the ring and put it on his finger. He could not speak. He felt Sam looking at him, as if he knew that his master was in some great trouble, but he could not turn towards him. He shut his eyes and struggled for a while, but the resistance became unbearable. And at last he slowly drew out the chain and slipped the ring on the forefinger of his left hand. Immediately, though everything else remained as before, dim and dark, the shapes became terribly clear. He was able to see beneath their black wrappings. There were 5 tall figures, 2 standing on the lip of the dell, 3 advancing, with their white faces burned keen and merciless eyes. Under their mantles were long grey robes, upon their grey hairs were helms of silver, and their haggard hands were swords of steel. Their eyes fell on him and pierced him as they rushed towards him. Desperate, he drew his own sword, and it seemed to him that it flickered red, as if it was a firebrand. 2 of the figures halted. The third was taller than the others. His hair was long and gleaming, and on his helm was a crown. In one hand he held a long sword, and in the other a knife. Both the knife and the hand that held it glowed in a pale light. He sprang forward and bore down on Frodo. At that moment Frodo threw himself forward on the ground, and he heard himself crying aloud. At the same time he struck at the feet of his enemy. A shrill cry rang out in the night, and he felt a pain like a dart of poisoned ice pierce his left shoulder. Even as he swooned, he caught, as through a swirling mist, a glimpse of Strider leaping out of the darkness, with a flaming brand of wood in either hand. With a last effort, Frodo, dropping his sword, slipped the ring from his finger and closed his right hand tight upon it.
Another instance of a Morgul wound being given is during the Third Age, when the realm was under siege, and Ithilien and Osgiliath had been lost to Uruk-hai. This time the victim was Boromir, who was a noble and great captain whom even the Witch King feared and hated. He fought several extensive campaigns to win back the land, but during that war he received a Morgul wound. Even after being healed, his long life was cut short, and he became shrunken with pain and ruled for only 12 years before succumbing to death. Morgul wounds tend to fester even after being healed. As seen with Frodo, it too bothered him for the remainder of his life, the pain of which intensified when in the presence of the Witch King himself. Even after the destruction of Sauron, the wound still ached. It was said that Frodo would at times be transparent. That is another side effect of almost being confined to the unseen realm and made a wraith, a testament to the sinister dark magics of Mordor. It is also not known if all the Nazgul carried them, or even if a Morgul blade is a type of weapon enchantment rather than a very specific weapon itself. The Morgul blade was a brief but memorable weapon in the books and film, made memorable by the Witch King of Angmar and the Nazgul, who are without a doubt one of my favorite villains and monsters in fiction. The horror and dread they invoke is captivating, and the Weathertop scene in the movie is one of my oldest memories of the film. What did you think of the Nazgul and the Morgul Blade? Is the dark magic of Mordor as interesting to you as it is to me? Please let me know below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more bad guys and their tools of evil. I would like to cover a wide variety of villains and things associated with them to better appreciate our favorite antagonists.
What is that?
A relic of Mordor.
The Morgul Blade.
Made for the Witch King of Angmar.